Well, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Oakmont's own Linda Suhr. Linda grew up in the town of Napa. She was a teacher for 25 years in Sonoma and Mendocino County, as well as in Japan and Syria. She and her partner, Dave, spent 3 years sailing along the US East Coast in the Caribbean. And then in the spring of 2016, they moved to Oakmont, where Linda became his caregiver as Dave struggled with Alzheimer's disease. After his death in 2017, Linda was inspired by her experience as his caregiver and trustee to help other people. She trained as an end-of-life doula to provide non-medical support to those who are dying and to their families. After studying all aspects of end-of-life organizing, Linda created a new service called Autumn of Life Planning, through which she helps people find peace of mind by guiding them as they consider their quality of life and medical care wishes. She helps people organize their end-of-life documents and practical details, a very important task that many of us have put off completing. And I know I could do more from my own end-of-life planning, give me more peace of mind. And Linda, I'm hoping you're going to teach me how to do that. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. I'm going to go to, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I'm going to go to share screen right away. There we are. So welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sunday Symposium, for having me. I'm humbled to be here speaking before you now, and I'm very excited to be speaking to my friends and neighbors, my fellow Oakmonters, and to my cousins and my brother and sister who are also here attending. The program is called Live with Joy Now, but Plan Ahead. And we'll be getting into all of this. And Lynn, yes, I do hope that I can help you with your end-of-life planning. I want to tell you first a little bit about why and how I got into this. This is Dave and me on our sailboat, our 45-foot sloop, Wayward Wind, sailing, getting to warmer climes as we were coming from Annapolis, heading south. But before we started sailing, in 2008, Dave and I had been together for several years. We weren't married, but we were almost married, and we owned property, and we were going to take this trip. So we decided we better put our affairs in order, and we went to a lawyer and did our trusts and will and health directives. Then we went sailing, enjoyed life. And also, I should mention that Dave had seen his mom and dad both struggle with and die from Alzheimer's disease. So when he did his health directives, he included a specific paragraph with instructions about what he would want or not want if he had Alzheimer's disease and went into the late stage. So after we came back to California, we moved to Oakmont, and in 2018, by that time, he had been struggling quite a bit with Alzheimer's and was going from the middle to the late stage of Alzheimer's. And I'll try to say this quick, encapsulate this, what happened. A lot of things happened, but if we fast forward, he spent 2 weeks in the hospital at one point. He was really on a downward trend with his health, and we were trying to find the right medication to help him. And apparently the doctor says that he had some strokes, mini strokes, they called them. In that case, he could not speak. And I remembered his health directives and what he had said, and he had been very clear, not just in his directives, but he had told his kids and me repeatedly, if I get to the late stage of Alzheimer's, I just want to be let go. I don't want to live anymore. So I took the health directive in my hand and I went to the ICU doctor and I said, I know that you're in the the business of saving people's lives, but I really don't think Dave wants to be here anymore. And he stopped me and the doctor said, no, I'm in the business of caring for patients and their families. And so I said, thank you. And he read the paragraph that Dave had written. And what he'd said was that if I can no longer communicate with my loved ones, I don't want to be on artificial hydration and nutrition. The doctor said, okay, I'll make the order and we'll set up hospice and Dave can go home. So that's what we did. And my wonderful niece, who had just graduated from nursing school, came and helped me. And 3 days later, Dave died peacefully in our living room with his loved ones with him. It was there that I learned the importance of health care directives, the power of them and the importance of them. Though it was a difficult decision, we were confident that we were doing the right thing and honoring Dave's wishes. Another little thing that got me into this practice that I have is, and I'll tell this quickly, he had a trust and I was the trustee for his estate. After he died, we had a disagreement with myself and his kids and one of his best friends who was also a beneficiary. The upshot of it was 1.5 years of stress and strife and a lot of money and dealing with lawyers, and it was terrible. And it was all because we hadn't updated our trust. There was one detail that we hadn't fixed. So that was another lesson to me. And it was something that I would never want anyone to have to go through. And that is what actually motivated me to learn as much as I could, to share this information with people. And here I am today at the Sunday Symposium, preaching my gospel here. So let's look at what we're going to talk about today.
Turn your sound off on your phone.
The reality.
I'm trying to see if I can get it through here. I'm going to just try this again.
Vince, you need to mute yourself. Okay, I recognize the voice. The reality is that we're going to be talking about death and dying today, and that may bring up some difficult emotions. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge that there may be people here today who are experiencing a serious illness or have a terminal diagnosis. And for them, this is all very real and very present. And I want you to know I honor you, and I'm so glad you're here. And for those who are relatively healthy, you want to be proactive, and I'm so glad you're here. Next, we'll go over the plan, the 10 essential steps to organizing your end of life plan, which, by the way, will be available on the Sunday Symposium website soon. And also you can email me and I can send you a copy or mail you a copy. And lastly, at the end, I hope we'll wrap up, and I hope you will find that there is some joy to be had by doing all of this. But I want to dig in and get right to it. I'm going to flash a word up just for a few seconds, and I want you to notice your response or the first word that comes to mind when you read the following. Now here's a calming picture. You can calm down now. A lot of people have anxiety and fear around the thought of dying and death. Many people feel okay, they accept it, they're peaceful, but still they don't want to plan, they don't want to think about it, they don't want to do the work that it takes to put everything in place. But a lot of people really have a fear or anxiety around it. And it's important, if you do, that's okay and that's quite normal. But maybe it's a good idea to try to dig down a little deeper and see what is the cause of that. Is it possibly, oops, I just noticed, I don't know. Sorry, I just realized that was there. At the moment of death, you might wonder what happens. Sorry, just doing a little tech thing here. Just realized this is up there. Excuse me just a moment while I do this. Okay, after death, some people, at the moment of death, here we are. So some people are afraid of what happens right at the moment of death. What happens? Some people have been devoutly religious all their lives, and then when they find themselves in this end of life time, they have questions. Why is this happening to me? Why now? It's not uncommon. Other people might think, what happens? Where do we go? Some might have an anxiety about what happens after death, and even practical things such as, if you're caring for a loved one, your wife has dementia, who will take care of her if I die? Some people have a fear of missing out on things such as special events. Oh, my granddaughter's going to be graduating from college. I don't want to miss that. Or a wedding, or some special event, or goals not met. For me, I thought I was going to be fluent in Spanish right now. And I always set the goal of it by 40, by 50. Well, now I've got to do it by 70. I'm going to be fluent in Spanish. We'll see. I hope so. Anyway, travel. A lot of people would love to go to a special place. If you've never been to Greece, you may want to go to Greece. I wanted to do that. Or you want to visit someone you haven't seen in many years. Sometimes people have a fear of death or anxiety about what happens leading up to death, the before death time or dying time. They worry about pain and suffering. I know I do. Or maybe they worry about money. Will my money outlast me, or will I outlast my money? That's a big concern. And sometimes people worry about loss of independence during this time. Oh, I don't want to be around if I can't feed myself, or I don't want to be here if I have to have help going to the bathroom or bathing, or if I can't communicate with my family. So this is the time that most people forget to think about. Sometimes we think, oh, I'm living and then I'm just going to die. But we don't think about this time that may very well happen leading up to death. And there are times when people just suddenly die. My dad and mom were very healthy in their early mid-80s. And one night, mom kissed and dad kissed goodnight. And the next morning, mom couldn't wake up dad. He had died in his sleep. And this is a way that I know, for me, if I could choose a way, this would be a gentle way to die. But the reality is often different. 80% of Americans would prefer to die at home. But can you guess what the reality is? This is where Americans die. Really, only 20% die at home. 60% die in acute care hospitals, and 20% die in nursing homes. So there's a big disconnect here about what we would want and the reality. So what should we do? Well, there are two choices, basically. You can talk about it now, or you can put it off. If you talk about it now, you can empower yourself and make decisions for yourself while you have a clear mind. If not, if you put it off, well, you can make decisions later. Maybe you're in the hospital, or maybe you have a diagnosis of cancer, so you have many months, but you're in a time of stress and crisis. You can let your family make decisions for you later, but they'll be in stress if you're in a time of crisis, or if you cannot speak for yourself, they'll be wondering, what does mom want? What does dad want? Or you can let the medical professionals make decisions for you later. Now, there's no way to cover all medical possibilities, but we can do the best we can do the best, but we do the best we can. And I think it's pretty clear what the best choice is here. And once we do this hard work, it is hard work. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Once we do it, there is this great sense of relief. And in fact, that's the number one word that my clients tell me. They feel a great sense of relief when they have done this, have taken care of it. So imagine how this would feel. And once you feel you have that relief, then you can focus on living life and enjoying life. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Don't we really want to enjoy our lives? Our ultimate goal, after all, is not a good death, but a good life to the very end. So let's get to the 10 essential steps to organizing your end-of-life plan. And as we go through it, I want you to keep in mind, I'm not just talking about health directives. I'm talking about pretty much everything. This is a very comprehensive list, and we're going to go right through it, and it's a lot. And as I said, the notes from this part of the talk will be available to you. And the scenarios that I'm thinking about are, it may be that you're a person who has had a stroke and has to go to the hospital and you can't speak for yourself. Or it may be that you've had a serious illness, you have a serious illness and you have many months, but you need to organize your things. I have a friend who just was diagnosed with a serious cancer and only has about 6 months, and they're trying to get all their things organized so they can enjoy their life. Another scenario is for the people who are just being proactive. They're pretty healthy right now, but they're thinking clearly and they want to get it together. And you know, with us here in Oakmont, we have the added thing that we have to consider of fires and making it a go bag. So a lot of what I'm telling you today and the things that you would want to gather are things that you would put in your go bag. To start, the first thing you start with is to explore my values, wishes, and needs for end-of-life matters. So you want to start by thinking, what is most important to me? What gives my life meaning? How do my values and beliefs inform my planning? Maybe I have spiritual beliefs. What do I wish for my loved ones? And what will I need for my remaining days? So these are big overarching questions that you will be asking. And these will shade and color what you do, how you answer and put together the rest of your wishes and instructions. So that for the next thing is to gather your essential personal documents and determine important contacts. For example, if you had, as I said, a sudden acute injury or accident and you were rushed to the hospital, what would the hospital need immediately from you? And you may know some of that: name, your birth date, your health insurance, these kinds of things. What would my family and caregiver need to know if I am ill and over a long period of time? Medication lists, allergies, and medical conditions. If you're suddenly ill, these things are important to your doctors and your medical care providers. What about my personal documents? It's good to locate these things: driver's license, social security card, Medicare card, marriage and divorce papers, military documents, citizenship papers. One family I know, they were the mother has been diagnosed with ALS, and they were looking for, they wanted to help her register for disability, and they needed to have her divorce decree. She'd been divorced for decades, so they needed to dig around and find it, which they did. Family information such as names, relationship, and contact. Who would you want to have contacted? And then dependent information. Are you caring for another person, a loved one? What would someone else need to know about that person's care? And of course, our dear pets. What would someone need to know about the care of your pet? And we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. So that was sort of the first tier of people, the first concentric circle, let's say. The next circle would be doctors and other medical professionals, the pharmacy, hospital, medical offices, caregivers, and the care facility, all of the contact information for these people that need to know. Your caregivers would need to know, your loved ones would need to know this information. And then in another layer would be your lawyer, accountant, or financial planner. Perhaps your son needs to know something about your accounts, and the financial planner can get some of that information. People who are actively in my life, who would want to be notified. Groups, clubs, affiliations, organizations, and place of worship. Who would you want to have notified if you became ill or upon your death? Organize key health and legal documents. With my older clients, this is where we often start. This is where we zero in. Clients want to deal with, right away, with advanced healthcare directives. And I'm not going to go into any of these in any depth. That's a lot of information. But the healthcare directive, in briefly, is it states my healthcare wishes and it designates who will speak for me. That is the durable power of attorney for medical decisions, sometimes called the agent or proxy or surrogate, and in other states there may be other names. You want to have your will or trust, you want to locate those, and also you should know whether a trust is right for you or not, and that would be a conversation with an estate attorney. You would want to set up a durable power of attorney for finance in the case that you cannot manage your money anymore. Who would take over paying your bills and making sure that things flow financially for you? The POLST, or Physician Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment, and it's called other things in other states, and the DNR, Do Not Resuscitate, are orders from your doctor. In general, they're for those who are frail or seriously ill, but this is a conversation you would want to have with your doctor. If someone is very frail, they're very elderly, and if they suddenly had trouble breathing and 911 was called, would you really want them to have the electric paddles on their chest and possibly break ribs or be intubated? This is a conversation that you would want to have if you're very elderly and frail, or have it, whether you are or aren't, you can have this conversation with your doctor about the POLST and DNR. This next one, list financial and personal property information. This is a big thing. I know it is. It's a lot. The main thing I will tell you right away, and this is really important, and what I have heard from lawyers, is to ensure that your assets are titled correctly and that to whom and how they will pass reflect your wishes. So if you did your trust or your will a long time ago, it's really important to go back and review it and check these things to make sure that they are titled correctly. For example, when you open a bank account or an IRA, you name a beneficiary. If you didn't, you should have. And if you didn't, do it now. Sometimes, and this is what I've heard from lawyers, is that people opened an IRA when they were married many years ago, and then they got a divorce, and then they've since remarried, or they're living with someone else. And then when the person dies, the ex-spouse is the named beneficiary. So this is something that comes up. So it's very important to review your documents. And these are the things you want to review. Bank and other financial accounts, any accounts, list the numbers and the institutions. Income, bills, debt, auto deposits, auto pays. My brother is he loves spreadsheets. And for our mom, he did a spreadsheet with all of these things on one spreadsheet. It was very handy. Thank you, Dave. Investments, retirement, traded accounts, stocks and bonds, IRAs, all of those things need to be listed. Real estate, rentals, and timeshares. A good friend of mine, her mother had a timeshare. And when her mother died, my friend said that it was just a spider web of problems. And they still had to keep paying on the timeshare for months after her mother had died, even though she couldn't use the timeshare. So check into those contracts and see what happens. What happens if I become ill or die? And any valuable assets, you should list vehicles, collections, art, antiques. And someone just told me about something that they do where they take a video, they have a camera and they videotape little stories about their special pieces of art or antiques or furniture. And then they can also say, and I would like so-and-so to have this. So that, I thought that was a great idea. You may have covered that in your will, but if you haven't, this is one way to do it. And all of your insurance, you should list all of your policies and your income tax returns and their location. Then there comes the practical information, online accounts. That can be a real bugaboo. We all have a million social media accounts and other online accounts. Where are the passwords? I actually gave a talk at the Sebastopol Senior Center on Friday on this same stuff. And one of the women went, the passwords are all right here. And I thought, well, that's fine. But if you're ill and someone needs to access something, that's going to be a problem. So you want to have a good place to store your passwords. And you want to let your trusted, of course, close person, your whomever that is in your life, know where to find these passwords. Also, you might want to consider an online password manager. I've been using LastPass, and it's been working great for me. There are others though, and talk to people who know a little bit more about technology. This way with LastPass, I just really need to know one password, but make sure you share that password with someone that you trust. Electronic devices. If you have your computer and it needs a password to open it, what's the password? Who has the password? And where is that device located? Your phones, any kind of electronic devices that have passwords. If you created a website yourself, you want to think about how that would wind down upon your death. Along with other practical information are helpful home details. And if you have a storage unit, information about that. One of my dear friends' partners recently died, and he had a storage unit, and she didn't really have anything to do with the storage unit. After he died, we had to go through his car and look for the key and try to find a receipt or something, which we did, that had the unit number so they could get into the storage unit. So these are stories, these are true stories. List anything that might be useful for my loved ones to enter my home and make sure things run smoothly. So for every person, that's going to be different, but here are a few general things. Location of keys and garage door code and opener. Location of your safe and combination. Who has the combination? And I do not recommend having hiding places. If you don't tell anyone where you've hidden that gold bar or that bag of money, no one will know where it is, and it may be gone forever. And also, if you have an alarm security system, it's really important to let a trusted person know the contact and maybe the code and the name of the company. There are myriad other things to think about. Gardeners, housekeepers, handy people who do repairs. You might want to list who does these things. So if you are moved to an assisted living place, for example, but your home's still going, you might want to have the gardener still come and mow the lawn. This next section doesn't apply to most people, so I'll go through it quickly. If you have if you own your own business, you want to know where your business documents are and instructions for how to wind down your business if you pass away. Legal matters. Are you involved in any lawsuits? You need to write that down. Are you involved on a trust for someone else? Are you a trustee or have you been named a beneficiary? It's good to write that down so people know. Loans of money or other items. Have you lent out any money or items that need to be returned to you? Or have you borrowed any money or items that you need to be taken care of? And have you been a cosigner on a loan? Dave was a cosigner on his son's truck loan. So when Dave died, we had to notify the bank and other arrangements needed to be made. So this last part, it isn't the last part, but almost the last part. I call it final chapter, which is actually. And this has to do with caregiving and hospice preferences. You know, we live in Oakmont. And so we know a lot about the caregiving facilities. We have friends, spouses, and so on who are in these places. And maybe you've seen a place that you've heard good things about, or maybe you would like a place that's small and a little homey, or maybe you'd like a big place with lots of activities. If you have a say, write it down if you have a preference. And also with hospice, same thing. If you've worked with a hospice or you've heard good things about hospice, why not write it down? It's one less thing for your loved ones to have to deal with. And pet care, who's going to take care of your pet? Some people take the care of this in their will. But if you haven't, you would want to write this down and tell all about what anyone would need to know about your pet, what they eat, their medicines, what their behaviors are, and so on. I put death certificate information on here because it's the death certificate, when you have to fill it out, is pretty standard, you know, name, birth date, and so on. But there's a couple of little obscure things. One is that the death certificate asks for your parents' full names, first, middle, and last names, and their birth states. So we had a little trouble with Dave's mother's middle name. So we took a little digging to find that. They also want to know my education level. So you might want to write that down so people don't have to wonder. And I'm a stickler for these kinds of things. My favorite TV show is Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates Jr. And they're always going back into documents. And so I think it's important to, for historical reasons, to try to fill these things out as carefully as possible. So obituary, who do you want to write your obituary? Or do you want to write your own obituary? When my father died, he left, I don't know why he wrote it, but he wrote this little synopsis of his whole life, all the highlights, his achievements, his landmark things that happened in his life. It made writing his obituary, which I was pleased to be able to do, it made it so much easier for me. So you might think about that. In organ and body donation, if you are interested in donating your organs, you may already have signed up with the DMV and registered. If you want to do a whole body donation, there are medical schools that really like to have your body for research. It helps of course, it helps our medical students become doctors and helps them learn. So this is, for me personally, this is what I'm choosing to do. And so I've contacted UCSF and downloaded the papers, and I need to finish filling them out and turn them in. So, and there are other medical schools besides UCSF. And then when it comes to your memorial, your celebration of life, your funeral, do you have any input that you want to give into that? Maybe you have special kind of cuisine that you love and you would like to have that served at your celebration of life. Also, if you have a funeral arrangements, maybe you have a prepaid plan. If you do, where are those papers? It would be so helpful to have those papers handy. Final disposition wishes. There are lots of choices now. Think of burial and cremation, but there are other things. There's green burial, and I just read that Desmond Tutu is choosing to have the process called aquamation, which has to do with water hydrolysis. So lots of possibilities. Now here are a couple of things that are really optional, but they're important. Consider doing a life review and creating a personal legacy. Well, what are those? So doing a life review is when you think back on your life, it's looking back. And people often they can write it, they can dictate it, they can videotape it. And sometimes when you're doing this, it brings up some unfinished business, or maybe some regrets, or some secrets, or things that are left unsaid, and some uneasiness. And people who are nearing the end of their life, they want to sometimes have resolution with these things. It really bothers them, and these things come up. So maybe there's a way to write a letter or tell the person, now is the time to do that. And then creating a personal legacy, this answers the question, how do I want to be remembered? Is there something that I want to express about my life, about what my life meant to me? Could be tangible or intangible. Could be letters to loved ones. This is really a lot of possibilities here. It could be sharing some art, making some art and sharing some art. If you love to cook, you may compile some favorite recipes and give them to your loved ones. Or maybe music that you love, a special MP3 or CD, or an anthology of poems that you love. And then your loved ones could, when they pick these things up or listen to them, then they're remembering you in a special way. And honestly, the sky's the limit on this. You can Google personal legacy and see all sorts of creative things that people are doing. So next, getting closer to the end, assemble the vital documents. Now you can store them on paper, and I mentioned a go bag. So that's a possibility. You can store these things, whatever is convenient for you. Some people put them in a portable file box. I have a canvas bag that I can easily pick up and take as my go bag. It's a good idea also to store things in the cloud. That way, if you lose these papers, these documents, you have everything in the cloud, such as Google Drive or Dropbox. The main thing is to store them in secure places and let your loved ones know where these places are, your trusted ones. You want to share the documents with your trusted loved ones, and especially the key information, and especially the health directives with the agent you have chosen for your healthcare decisions. That's really important. And tell them how to access these documents. And for the healthcare directive, your agent should have a copy of your healthcare directive on file now, anytime. And then you want to review and update periodically and when there are changes. And I mentioned my situation where we had done our trust, we thought we were all squared away, but we didn't update it. And there was one little thing that just made all the difference. If we had only done that, none of that year and a half of strife and stress would have happened. So last step is enjoy life, knowing my affairs are in order and that I am leaving an invaluable gift to my loved ones and also a gift to yourself. So I want to impart on you that to enjoy life. Yes, we're thinking about all this heavy stuff, but enjoy life. That's what it's all about. And think about what is important to you and do that. You might ask, how do I get started? And well, I would start with what number one was, what is most important to me? Think about these things, about what gives my life meaning? What are my values? And if you have trouble, if you're delaying, procrastinating, what keeps me from end of life planning? If really try to dig down like I was talking about earlier, what is it really? What is really holding me back from doing that? And if needed, talk to someone, talk to friends, talk to your religious leader, talk to an end of life person, talk to people to find out what it is that's keeping you. And then make a date to do it. Start small, maybe an hour, maybe even 15 minutes. Start small. I have to tell you one little short story. My sister and brother-in-law who are here, Doug and Kathy Smith on Crest Ridge, we meet every Wednesday afternoon for lunch and spend time together. And 2 weeks ago, we had decided we were going to do go over our health directives. So I came over, we had lunch, and guess what we did? We spent the whole afternoon playing Rummy Cube. So by 4:30, we said, oh no, we forgot to do our health directives. So we said, okay, next week we're gonna do it. So this past Wednesday, we did it. We sat down, we discussed our health directives, and we checked in with each other. And we really found out, oh, do you still feel this way? Oh, you want this? Okay. And we understood what was behind this, what was on paper. because it's not always clear what's on paper, but if you have the conversation, it's so much better because you really understand it. So do that. And another thing that came up is they had questions among themselves that one thought one thing and one thought the other. They both had some assumptions. And so they realized, oh gosh, we're not on the same page. We need to get on the same page about this. It was really useful. So now they're going to have the conversation. And we scheduled a time in a couple of weeks from now. So that's what you should do too, is block out the time, just like you block out time to go to the doctor or the dentist. You need to block out time to do this. I hope I have inspired you to put your affairs in order and your mind at ease. And there's one little short thing I want to say, that one of my fellow end-of-life doulas, Diane Button, has just written a book. And in it, she said that she has found, and this is anecdotal, not based on research, that people who do this end-of-life planning, they have the conversations, they take care of the unfinished business, they are at peace. And even though their life is ending and they're near their death, they're calm about it and they have a sense of peace. So I thought that was really interesting and really valuable. So I encourage you, there are many reasons to do this. The main reason is to have peace and calm. And, you know, death is part of life. You can't have birth without death. It's a package deal. So that's all I have to tell you today. If you please contact me, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. Just a reminder, if you have a question, you want to put it in the chat. Also, I think at this point, Linda, yeah, there we go. I'm going to ask the first question. Linda, a lot of this is dealt with as an individual basis. But for many of us, we've seen a situation where there is a caregiver partner, and the caregiver partner actually knows a lot about the person who is ill and how they want to be treated, but doesn't think a whit about their own situation, nor about what might happen if something happens to them while they're still having the responsibility of the person who has a more severe situation. Can you talk about that for a couple of minutes?
So you're asking about someone who's a caregiver.
Yeah,
And there's
my mom, the classic case. My mom was caregiver for my dad, and he had an extended period of senility. But during that period, she also declined. And so she never thought about herself, okay? She only thought about him. So you couldn't get her to focus a bit on her own situation.
Yeah, that unfortunately is very common. And I don't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but it is very common for caregivers to die before the person that they're caring for dies. Because you can imagine they're run down, they're not really taking care of themselves, and perhaps they're exhausted. It's a fact. So if you know people in that position, it is important that you encourage them to take care of themselves. One, get help when they can get help, and do this end-of-life planning for themselves too. If you're in that position, it's very important to encourage people to do that.
Okay, again, more questions, just run into the chat if you can, or I will go to the gallery view if anybody wants to raise their hand mechanically or physically.
I have one, George.
Okay. Okay, Virginia's got a question.
I do. Thank you for your presentation. One question, and then I work in real estate, so I do a lot of after cleanup. So just a little caution. Most of your kids don't want your stuff. Thank you. We all would appreciate you dealing with that beforehand. And you know, the joy you get when you give things when you're alive is much better than the joy you're not going to get when people get things when you pass away. So include that in your joy. One of the comments I had is, it is very difficult when people have more than one heir, when you are making your trust and you have a successor trustee, who to nominate. I think that if you could address a little bit, Linda, about how you choose the person that you nominate to be your successor trustee instead of just going with my oldest child.
Right. Great question. It's important that it be the best person for the job. And that person might not necessarily be your oldest child or your spouse or the person that's closest to you. When it comes to successor trustee, who's organized, who's good with organizing money, and who's a good communicator. These are the kinds of things you would want to look for in a successor trustee. When it comes to a healthcare DPOA, a healthcare proxy or agent, who would be able to make the decisions that I want? If I wanted to have my life, if I wanted my life to end sooner than they would they be able to follow my directions? So yeah, that's a good question. And if you're not sure, talk to an attorney, talk to people in this field to find out what makes a good heir trustee. So yeah. And I love what you said about things, and getting rid of things. I read in one book that millennials and young people don't want that brown curvy furniture, meaning antiques that we all have. So yes, they're into minimalism and they want things, they don't want to deal with all this stuff. So good point.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
I see
Okay.
Lynn.
Lynn, you have a question?
I do. So if I'm in the hospital and not really, maybe I'm delirious, not really able to cope with what's going on, and a dear friend comes in and wants to be my advocate, wants to just help out and make sure that I get really good care. What if a friend just comes in and says, but that's not what Lynn would want. I know what she does that person have to have any special credentials? Would the healthcare professionals want to listen to that? You said you've done a lot of studying about this end of life plan. What did you learn?
Well, first I'm going to say I'm not a legal professional, medical professional, or financial professional. That said, so I can't give any advice or anything like that. But I believe that that's the trick with waiting till there's a crisis to find your advocate. It would be much better to find your advocate when you're healthy, when you're thinking clearly. And in that case, I'm not sure, but I know that the person who's on your legal documents is the person who legally can make healthcare decisions for you. Now, I think in reality, your healthcare proxy might live in another state. So there's a team of people, it's good to assemble a team of people who can help you with these decisions. But that's the situation you've described is a tricky situation. I don't know the exact answer to that, but I would say do what you can to be proactive and not get into that situation.
Well, I know if I have designated a DPOAH, that's one thing. That person has legal authority to speak for me if I can't speak for myself. I'm just talking about just being an advocate for I want somebody in, if I'm in a nursing home, to be able to make sure I get good care.
Yeah, sure. In that case, yeah, you could have someone, a friend or an advocate, and there is such a thing as a healthcare advocate. There are, I know a woman here in Santa Rosa who that is her job, that's her profession. She's worked in the medical industry for a long time, but she works with people to advocate for them in the medical system. So yeah, there are people you can hire, but yeah, I think friends could help advocate for you. But when it comes to hard decisions, I think my understanding is that it would go to the healthcare advocate. But yes, I think you can have friends advocate for you, to make sure that you're getting the food that you should be getting in your assisted living place and that sort of thing. That answered your question.
Linda, am I correct that you have in fact offered this as a paid service?
Yes.
Okay.
The end of life doula work, not healthcare advocacy, but
Right.
I mean, there is some of that in what I do, but.
Okay. If I were going to do that with you, what would I need to bring with me?
Well, we would start by looking at what you want to do exactly and what your situation is. It's very client driven, what I do. So are you someone who is ill? Are you someone who's healthy, but you want to organize and do pre-planning? So I can't answer what you would need to bring with you until I know exactly what your situation is. And the first meeting would be just getting to know each other and finding out what the needs are.
Okay. Again, your fee structure is a per visit or a flat fee?
I do both. It depends. Again, it depends on the situation. There's so many different situations. So I have plans and packages, but I also do per the hour. So.
When you have someone, I'm reading questions now. When you have someone who you believe needs to go through this process but doesn't want to, they don't want to think ahead, they want to plan ahead. What is your experience about the best way to move them in the right direction?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. For someone who doesn't want to talk about it or avoids talking about it for one reason or another, especially since now all of you are on this Sunday Symposium with this topic, you have an in. A good way to start the conversation is to start with yourself. I attended the Sunday Symposium about end-of-life planning, and it really got me thinking about my own life and my own end of life. And I was wondering, have you thought about these things? I'm starting to put my health directives in place, and I'm really reviewing what I have. Have you thought about these things? And so that's one kind of way. And also with COVID, that's another in. Gosh, COVID is everywhere. It kind of has made us all think about death and dying. Let's see, what else? I was just going to say something else. Let's see, sorry, just lost it. But that's a good way to start with yourself.
Okay.
Oh, and also, I know what I was going to say, to say something like, especially if it's someone very close to you, and if you're end up taking care of them or being their advocate, you might say, I'm concerned because, we're all getting older, and if something happened to you, what I want to make sure that I do the right thing by you. I would want to make sure that I'm honoring what you would want. So can we have a conversation about this? Can we have dinner and talk about this? So that's another way to do it.
Okay, Peggy, you had a question. You want to tackle it?
Hi, yes, thank you, Lynn. This is just wonderful. What about a fiduciary? I'm kind of reluctant to do that, but I don't want to burden my family or friends with my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I am in the process of meeting with some friends, and they are going to be working with a fiduciary, we're pretty sure, and I'm going to be involved because I'm involved in part of their decision-making stuff. And I'm going to be meeting with this fiduciary with my friends next month in February. So I'll have more information about that. But I have looked up, and I don't know if anybody else has used a fiduciary, but I have read a little bit about them. And yes, a fiduciary, you can name a fiduciary as your trustee and as your healthcare advocate or your healthcare DPOA. But this is where I'm going to find out more about is we were talking about, well, there's healthcare DPOA, and then there's someone who's going to be there on your team, like helping, making sure things get taken care of. So can a person do that? You know, to what degree? Where does the fiduciary duty stop, and then the friend or advocate take over? You know, so I'm looking forward to that discussion next month with the fiduciary.
Yeah, thank you. It's just, I've had, not me personally experienced, but I have known people, and particularly someone in the neighborhood who had a fiduciary helping them. And I say help in quotes, because the fiduciary, in my opinion, was a total disaster. The fiduciary was wonderful, was a car salesman to this friend, and it didn't turn out that way. And it was sad.
Yeah. Well, like anything, you know, there's good ones and bad ones. And so I think you would have to research very carefully and get a lot of references and so on. But you know, that I can't imagine that fiduciary would stay in business very long if they're bad fiduciaries, or anybody for that matter. So, you know, and you can ask friends and find out from people who've used fiduciaries
Right.
to learn more too. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This has been a very insightful and hopefully uplifting discussion for such a weird topic.
Yeah. And I do want to say one more thing, George, before it's over.
Go.
Oh, okay. I just want to invite everybody to Cafe Mortel, because it's a great group of people and we talk about these things. And, you know, I find that the more we talk about it, the easier it is to talk about. So I invite you, it's the first Wednesday of the month, and it's in person and on Zoom. So yeah, come and visit. It's not as bleak as you may think. And they're really nice people.
Would you tell people how they can connect with Cafe Mortel?
Gosh.
More importantly, why don't you tell them that that we're going to put your 10 steps on the website and they can download it.
Okay, yeah, great. Yes, you just heard that from Judy. So yes, and you can also contact me too. And Cafe Mortel connection, gosh, I think if you go on the Oakmont Village Association under clubs, and you'll see Cafe Mortel there. And if you can't find it, just email me and I'll help you.
Okay, Linda, thank you so much. Next week, we have Ed Birnbaum, who's going to be giving us an exciting tour of the wonders of mountains, from the Sierras to the Himalayas. And as